I hope people just imagine that I stumbled down the stairs running at this computer to record this. It's complete opposite. I actually stumbled up the stairs to get up here, technically. But I'm cutting it really down to the wire on time today to record and get everything done. Um, I have the big FNAF TCG live stream in 3 hours and 2 hours worth of stuff to do right now. This being one of those hour-long activities, potentially, depending on how long this interview is. So, let's just get into it. There's no other bit. I hope the volume's good.
Scott, tell me what's in the box.
I think as the 10-year anniversary is upon us, I will give this as my gift to the fan base on this 10th anniversary. What's in the box is
Another Scott interview. Wow, that's really high production on that one.
Aw. Hey, Mabel.
Yeah, she's the best. What's going on, guys? Dorko back again. Hope
She
you're
survived.
fantastic
She's good.
today. And it's the 10-year anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's. It is August the 5th, which means if you've been looking at the list, what the official Twitter has been saying, it's the interview with Scott Cawthon, everybody.
It's actually the fourth. I got
Hey,
moved up a
everybody.
day.
How's it going? Dawko, good to see you again.
Yes, 6 years since the last
Hi-res
interview,
Scott.
right? Which is crazy.
We weren't
A lot
expecting
of things
this.
have been happening since
Well, we were.
then.
We
so
teased it.
Let's go back a little bit. So the interview was August 2018. So after that, we got Help Wanted, Special Delivery, Security Breach, Help Wanted 2, Ruin DLC. So there's a lot going on. And of course, the future games as well. Yesterday, Steelwall has announced something. I don't know what it is yet because we're
They
recording.
have not. This is what's kind of funny about things being shuffled a little, is we still don't know what the Steel Wall announcement is.
Recording this, you know, a couple of months before. But guys, whatever it was, I hope you're very excited for it. Future Dorko, Into the Pit as well. Stuff to look for. There's so much stuff to look forward to, and it's really cool that you've done like a week of exciting things for the 10-year anniversary. You know,
This is one of the coolest events I've seen for a franchise in a while. Like, Mario got a game that was running for months and then got shut down, and a similar game you could buy for a limited amount of months that was basically just a polished up ROM dump that also went away. It's like, wow. The fact that, like, this has genuinely been a hyped week. I've had something to record or stream every day, and, like, doing the TCG first tournament, I felt like was the perfect way to contribute to this hype flow, because I'm like, this is the time to do it. It's going to be good for both the TCG and the general hype of the game. Because a lot of people who don't really understand the TCG are going to get the chance to see it for the first time in action. Even though I played it on stream, it's never been like an event or something I've hyped up. But this one I'm kind of trying to do a little bit. It's probably going to be small. I'm probably going to have like 20 viewers at most, probably most of the stream. But it's enough that I think more people will like learn about the game, and I'll be able to spread it a little bit better. Someday maybe I'll contact Scott when I feel like the game is in a state where I should contact someone about it. But let's get back to the interview. This is going to be the big one.
I've never seen something like this before. 10 years of Five Nights at Freddy's, which is it's pretty crazy, right?
Man, I can't believe it's been so long since our last interview. That really seems like just it doesn't. How long did you say ago it was? 6 years ago? That's hard to believe. That's impossible to believe.
I know, right? I've actually got a song for you that I'm going to play for you to celebrate the 10-year anniversary.
Okay, no, this is getting things off to a kind of an awkward start, but I'll let you go on ahead.
Okay. Are you
No,
ready
wait, you're
for
going to be performing. Wait, you're going to be performing this yourself, or is something recorded?
I've got the harmonica right here.
Oh, a harmonica. Okay, my favorite.
I've been practicing this song for over 32 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
28 years
are you ready
old.
for this?
I'm ready. Come on now, you started this.
Right. Okay.
Can't stop. You
Ready?
can't take it back, Dawko.
I'm really good. I'm really good.
Oh, 8-bit Crush Dawko.
Now, I will admit that I couldn't actually hear that. I don't know if your thing was cutting the audio out.
Well, I actually played a spell.
Oh.
The spell is from 1864 by a wizard named Dewey Muscrewy.
What is the bit here?
Okay.
That spell has now hypnotized you to tell me all the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh, jeez. Now, I thought we talked about this in advance. Now, listen. This is a bad idea to start talking about lore. All right, well, here, you'll have to give me specific questions, and I'll see what I can answer for you.
I was joking.
But I make no promises.
Scott, tell me what's in the box.
I know this is going to be a joke question or answer, but I am curious what bit we're going to get out of.
Wow, just direct. Just out and direct, just like that.
Yeah.
Well, look, okay. It's the 10-year anniversary, okay? And even though I like to be elusive, I like to kind of tease the fan base. I like to, and I do like there to be an air of mystery about things. Sometimes I do let things go on for too long. And I understand that sometimes things become not fun anymore and things can become frustrating for.
I really don't hope this is a bit, because this is a genuine sentiment that, like, does anyone still like wondering what's in the box other than for the joke of we'll never know what's in the box? I kind of find it fun to speculate, but like at the same time, just kind of knowing what it was meant to be would be nice.
Theorists. So, okay. I think as the 10-year anniversary is upon us, I will give this as my gift to the fan base on this 10th anniversary. What's in the box is
Yeah, I knew it.
Oh my god.
And that's about it. And that's it, man.
So like we've been speaking about, 10 years of Five Nights at Freddy's, which is a crazy amount of time. I can't believe we're still here. It's been such a journey. So I just wanted to ask you, do you have a highlight moment for the whole 10 years of Five Nights at Freddy's since 2014?
I think there have definitely been a lot of satisfying moments. Like obviously if whenever one of the new games would come out and it would be positively received, that was obviously a huge relief. You know, there's never been any goal other than just giving everybody what they were really hyped up about, because you know when you see everybody getting hyped up and getting excited, if suddenly something comes out that just is a big letdown, there's no greater fear, I think, for a game developer. So that was always satisfying and a relief. But I think the biggest highlight was probably just going to the movie theater to watch the movie when it finally came out, because you know, behind the scenes of all of the games throughout the years and behind the scenes of all the books being written and everything else, there was always the movie. The movie was just a slow burn project, even just starting as late as 2014. So that has been in the background, being, you know, progressing for almost the entirety of not almost the entirety of that first 9 years.
It is true. That was the biggest mystery, I would say, from like the non-lore perspective, was what was going on with the movie. And seeing the little chips and insight we've gotten over time, I think been really interesting. And, you know, like, say what you will about the movie, some people liked it, some didn't. If you look at the list of the other FNAF movies that would have been, I do think this was one of the better options. Because, yeah, a Silver Eyes movie would have been fine and all. However, as much as I kind of like Silver Eyes in its own world and way, it is very much a book. And I do not mean that in a bad way. It's just like, some things don't translate well to visual mediums great. I had this whole scrap video about why were the Stray Stingers short stories and epilogues, because I realized so many of them were clearly visual intended in some ways. Like they're all about these grand visuals, like the agony rising up from the trash, or Andrew being freed from the situation by Jake, and the Eleanor's big monster transformation. It felt so visual. But then you rewind back to the novels and they feel so dialogue and so descriptive. Like, yeah, there are visuals, but it doesn't feel like it's like trapped by them. The stinger sometimes to me at least, feel like I would rather see this in a comic spread than I would read a description of it that doesn't feel like it does it justice, like what it's trying to convey. I don't know if I'll ever finish that video. I might rework it because I've already done some work on it. But we'll see.
So to be able to actually go sit in the theater and hear the reaction from everybody and hear the fans really enjoy it, that was definitely that was definitely a moment of just real happiness for me, I think.
Literally 9 years, you know, having ups and downs, you know, getting the script right as well. I know you've said on post before you've had so many scripts made for the movie. The plushies in Manhattan or something, that was one of the scripts. So
yeah, it was.
Yeah, I can imagine how, you know, difficult it's been, like trying to get it all done. You know, I can just imagine. Well, I can't imagine it because I'm not you, but you know, when me, Raz, and Ryan and Baz went to a premiere for it and sat down at the cinemas, and we all looked at each other at the end, and we had to like, we couldn't believe it, and we didn't even make the games. We've been there since, you know, basically day one, but we all said like, imagine how Scott's feeling right now, you know, just sitting down and seeing it actually, you know, on the big screen. It must be a crazy feeling.
Yeah, and now that I've been through the process, you know, I can tell you it's a miracle that any movie gets made, just being through that process, just how many wheels have to be turning at the same time, and how many things. And even though this process took a long time for me, you know, Hollywood works at just blazing speed where there's 100 things happening at the same time, and it's a miracle if these things get coordinated. And sometimes things don't work out, but sometimes they do. On the day that I was driving to New Orleans and the shooting was supposed to start the next day, on that drive, I was on the phone. It was like a 5-hour drive from where I was. I was on the phone the entire time trying to finish contracts and finish negotiating points, because there were still open items with there were still things that needed to be resolved with Universal, Blumhouse, the Actors Guild, the Writing Guild. There were just Louisiana. There were all of these things, and any one of them not being settled properly would mean we couldn't start filming. And all of those conversations were happening at the same time, and all of them depended on.
That sounds. I've been on 5-hour plus drives before. I couldn't imagine doing a phone call during one of those, even if it's like one of those interstate blank roads that just goes on for 40, 50 miles without any curves or changes. It's sometimes 100 miles in some areas of the world, or some areas of the states. I'm West Coast, so there's not as many of those big flat roads other than the I-5 really for me that I've ever really done a big road trip on. Actually, the I-5 has to be 80 miles, right? I know. Nah, I'd have to actually check the distance
On one of the
of flat road, of like straight flat road, to be clear, is what I mean.
Other ones. And so that was a very stressful drive, but that's just the way that Hollywood works. There's a million things happening at once. It was definitely a whirlwind, but to see all of those pieces come into place, it was pretty remarkable. And yeah, like you were saying, just all of the scripts, starting just with 2015, there were a couple of deals that weren't very good that I'm very fortunate didn't pan out. But then whenever I was with Warner Brothers briefly, that was a good deal, and I was very, very grateful to have that. But even that, whenever the stars seemed to have aligned, things just didn't work out there either. And so I was really fortunate to meet up with Jason Blum and get to have that deal with Blumhouse. They had a lot of faith in the project, and they were following my lead on a lot of things, sometimes to a fault, because lots of times I would throw things out and want to start over. But, they were with me the whole journey. They were with me, and they believed in the vision. And everybody just had the fans at heart. That's all anybody wanted to do. Everybody was just making sure that every part of them.
I do think a smaller studio relative to Warner was the better option in the long run. for the movie, because maybe it would have been a better movie if Warner had produced it. You could argue that, but I also feel like two things could have spiraled really out of control to make it a lot less enjoyable for most of the fans, which is A, they would have made a more generically good horror movie, which would have been better for most people, but not as great for the fans. But more importantly, and you see this happen, there are two ways that kind of big budget movie can go wrong. For something with a huge fan base, with either a director, writer, or original media's producer. And you can see that, to me, that's what happened with like stuff like Maze Runner in the original Percy Jackson movie, where they were kind of trying to be. I felt like they both wanted to be these Star Wars style epics, if that makes sense. That this big dramatic discovery adventure thing, and to an extent, in some areas, they pulled that off. To be honest, even if I don't really like either of those movies much, but those two, the original stories they were adapting, weren't kind of like that. This is a Maze Runner, for example, because I feel like that's the best example of what I was worried the FNAF movie would have been. It's like, the original book is almost, it's going to sound weird, is almost closer to, like, when it's tense, it's almost more like Aliens. Or where it's almost like this thriller kind of, or Alien also, where it's almost like this thriller, tight-paced movement thing, where there's always something around the corner, there's always something potentially, like, dangerous when it's in the maze. And it's more of this bizarro mystery kind of thing when it's within the walls. I don't really like the Maze Runner books after the first one, because they don't really feel like that. They actually do feel like that first movie. And maybe that's what they were intended to be, but like that's kind of the interesting thing about some books and mediums is you can get different things out of them than what the creator might have intended. And sometimes that's better than what the creator intended. I think that's what happened with Maze Runner for me. The world I got out of the first Maze Runner book was not what I felt like I got later. And that's really a random event now that I think about it. But I feel like the FNAF movie so could have easily been that kind of generic horror movie that happens to have good animatronics in it. Whereas I feel like Blumhouse was going to stick with the guy who made the thing's vision from the start. And as Scott just said, that sometimes is to a fault. It's kind of why I have higher hopes for FNAF Movie 2 than 1. It's because Scott's now been through that entire process. And so hopefully he's learned, and what faults he might have had in the first one might not be there.
Movie would be something that the fan base would look at and recognize or relate to or connect with. And I think in the end we were able to accomplish that. And I'm just really happy with that. And I think we landed with just the perfect cast, which, again, that almost didn't happen either. There were a couple of instances where someone else was about to get a part, and then something would happen that would make that not work out, and then someone better would step in. And I've said this to, my contacts at Blumhouse numerous times just over this last 6 months, even since the movie came out, thinking, aren't we glad that we got like Josh Hutcherson for this role? Like, isn't it great we had Elizabeth Lail for this role? Isn't it awesome we had Matthew Lillard for this role? Isn't it great we ended up with Piper Rubio for this role?
Piper is actually the most interesting pick for that movie to me. Not because it's weird to have a child actor, but it's weird to have a good child actor. You don't get that in most things. Because, like, yeah, she's not the best child actor I've ever seen, but she's one of those, like, she feels totally natural in this world and movie, and she feels like a shy kid with an improper family who doesn't know how to handle things, but still is excited about certain characters in worlds that let her feel like she has somewhere to belong. And the fact that I got that out of her character, when, like I said, child writing and child acting is so difficult. It is so many movies you just have to deal with yep, this is a kid pretending to be this character, and to an extent Piper Rubio has that, but it's like, it still feels fine. I don't question it that much.
Every single person that we ended up with was just absolutely perfect in those slots, and everybody was just a delight to work with. Once again, since I'm new to kind of the film industry, I got to talk to people about their other experiences on other projects, and it can be really scary because usually, from what I understand, every production has one one member of the cast or one person on staff or just one person that, you know, causes problems or something like that. We didn't have anything like that. Nothing like that. Everybody was just phenomenal. They were just a joy to work with, and getting to go to filming was really fun. So it was a really fun experience, and in the end, I'm just happy that the fans were happy with it. Now, that's not to say the film didn't have it's places where it could have been improved, and we're all, you know, and we all, me and Emma and Jason Blum, we're definitely chat about that and looking to make sure the second movie is a step up and an improvement. So lots of good things to look forward to, I think.
Yeah, it's exciting. And yeah, you're right about the fan reaction. The fans absolutely loved it. Like, we all can't wait for the next movie. It's so exciting. And I'm so glad, like, it's actually happening as well. So yeah, exciting times. So yeah, you said that you've got a highlight of the 10 years of FNAF. If you could go back and change one thing in those 10 years, do you have anything that you would change? You can't say the box.
No, you know, the one thing I would change, I wish I could go back and have one more shot at FNAF World. I really, really do. I know it still would probably definitely be the oddball in the series, no doubt. And maybe it would still have been a poor decision in general, but there were just a lot of bad decisions made at the beginning of that project that doomed it from the start. Like, I was making it with mobile in mind, so it was a really low resolution. I was thinking about it as a game on the phones. I tried to make the whole game on one frame in Click Team Fusion. That just means I wasn't allowing it to be as big as it could have been. I was trying to cram it all together for my own convenience. There were just several decisions that were made that really hindered that. And also, I was in a rush because I was getting a little arrogant, thinking that, hey, anything I make is going to be gold, you know. And I definitely ate some humble pie with that really, really quick, and I learned that is not the case. And so I've tried to be very careful.
It's interesting that the movie didn't exist when the last interview existed, but the regret is still FNAF World. Which, to be fair, I don't know what would have elicited a bigger reaction to Scott than FNAF World since then. But that is interesting to think that, like, it's still, though we are getting a bit more insight on what kind of made FNAF World a little inhibited in respect, which is interesting. Which is kind of why people are interested in the fact that there's updates lined up for FNAF World, kinda. Or there was at least something listed on, like, the Steam database for a potential FNAF World update, which is interesting. Which makes me wonder, so Five Labs at Freddy's has the windmill from FNAF World in the background. In the, I don't know if it's called animatronica in the kart racer, but it was called that. It was one of the scale, which just kind of makes them a little less cool.
FNAF World is underrated. I love it so much. There's just a charm to it. I really do. And I know you don't like it, but I absolutely love it, man. I really do. I love everything about it.
If I had allowed myself to work on it for one more year, just like really double its development cycle and let it be a high res game, I bet it would have really been something. But like I said, who knows? Maybe for the sequel someday.
Let's move on to Steelwall. The amazing Steelwall Studios. That was the next game after Ultimate Custom Night. Help Wanted. One of my favourite games in VR. I absolutely loved it. What has it been like working?
I used to say on stream that I downloaded it but refunded it, and now I'm wondering if I did at all, or did I refund another game and my brother tried to get Help Wanted and it didn't work for him. I remember that very clearly. And I also remember some VR game I got that didn't work on any setup I tried and refunding that. but I'm trying to remember if that was FNAF World or not, or FNAF VR or not. Was I conflating my brother's being not able to, which one? I'm trying to remember which happened, or if it was both. If we both tried it separately and it didn't work either time. Now that there's flat, because I also remember flat mode wasn't a thing yet. It wasn't even like an option, so it was all or nothing. Either it worked or didn't. Because now I'm going back and forth on it, because I just remembered that, oh yeah, he also did. So that memory of trying to get FNAF VR to work and not working, whatever. This is the one I need to play. There's a reason the screenshots in the FNAF TCG suck for a lot of the VR stuff. It's because if they aren't readily available, like promo shots or high quality shots people got for like thumbnails and stuff, I have to go into videos like this
with Steel Wool
and get the low res images
about it, because I know it's a big thing to, you know, give a company your baby basically and let them, you know, do what you've been doing for the past 5 years. How was it for the first time letting someone else work on FNAF?
I was really nervous about it. I was really nervous. You know, I went several years still doing it by myself, even after I had the financial ability to pay other people. Again, I wasn't in that mentality of being able to do that. So even though I could have done that, I was still doing things just all by myself, all the way through Pizzeria Simulator.
Yeah.
But by then it was I knew that it was getting too much for me. I knew that I had to find another partner for it, and I was scared of that because, you know, there are stories all over the internet available about just games that went completely wrong because of games being mismanaged in the hands of, you know, development companies. And I'm sure that all of their pitches on the surface would have sounded the same, but I really got lucky. For that reason, I really feel like I got lucky, because whereas I probably could have accidentally ended up with a company that did botch something, I didn't. I think I really honestly believe that I landed with the best, just one of the best development companies.
I will say, as many shots people have given to Steel Wool's era of FNAF in general, it's sort of, Steel Wool's era feels to me, and you know, I'm a comic nerd, so this is going to be comic logic to me, feels like the years following Stan Lee stopping writing Spider-Man's comics. I've read the first 100, 200 issues of it. I haven't gotten to the Black Suit yet, but that era is so interesting because right after Stan Lee leaves, it's not that bad at all. It's still pretty solid writing for a while. Then there's like this gap where it's like, okay, now that we're kind of used up on everything he advised us on and everything that we knew how to do, and we have to make new stories, what the hell do we do? And then sometime later they start getting back into the groove of it for a while. And there's still this strong Stan Lee influence on it. But then there's characters like the Kangaroo who just kind of blow, and there's nothing good about them. Really. And like you could argue that that's like, oh, that's your Security Rouge era. The Help Wanted is they're kind of retreading the old ground with knowing what worked and setting up their own seeds and ideas. And you get stuff like the Hobgoblin's rules in that time frame, because the Hobgoblin genuinely does rule in the Spectacular Spider-Man. Though I haven't read as much Spectacular Spider-Man as Amazing Spider-Man, but then there is that time frame where now that the writers have changed and the artists have changed, they've spent so long working on Spider-Man without Stan Lee that they're finally figuring out what the hell they do.
I think that might be I think that might be my favorite thing that they've made was Ruin, and the things that they have planned, which I'm not going to talk about right here, but the things that they have planned are really exciting too. So yeah, I've been really happy. It's been a really good experience. Well, I'll tell you, on Help Wanted, well, I was going to throw in, I'm happy with how Help Wanted came out, because at the time, and I don't have this anymore. I don't have a VR setup anymore. But whenever the first Help Wanted came out, I did have a VR setup. So I was able to beta test. And of course, I was leading the charge to want to beta test my own games. I got into the Funtime Auditorium and Funtime, and I noped out of it. took the headset off, and I immediately got on the phone with Steel One and said, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to test it. You test it. You're going to test it. You'll find someone else to test it. I didn't even get jump scared by Foxy. I was just in there in the darkness, and I knew I wasn't going to do it. And I never played it again. And I never played Help Wanted, and I never played Help Wanted 2 either. And I'm not going to.
People need to understand it though, right? Because in the past, like when I've obviously done videos on Help Wanted 1 and 2, I get a comment saying like, oh, it's not that scary. You're overreacted. It's not that.
Okay, this is the thing I will say. People give... It's... When you're watching FNAF in general, and especially with the V standing in front of you, and some dumb monkey part of your brain, even though it's cartoony and has like this kind of art style aesthetic to it, just is like, oh, that's a real animatronic charging at me, even though it's so clearly not. And in flat mode, you don't get that. It's a character in a game. But you know, even this, I consider Sun and Moon some of the shorter characters of the Security Breach era. Even they look like gangly monsters in VR.
That bad, but you don't know until you've literally put on the headset, right?
Yeah.
It's completely different, you know, just watching it from a screen is compared to having the actual headset on. It's terrifying.
Yeah, completely different experience.
My other question, Glitchtrap is one of my favorite characters in FNAF now. I absolutely love Glitchtrap. What are your thoughts on Glitchtrap as a whole, with the development of Help Wanted?
I love the character. And I know that this is kind of one of the places where I know that there's a little bit of a divide with maybe me and the fan base, or maybe just within the fan base, because roots of the supernatural instead. But I can't help my inclinations to lean sci-fi. So anything that involves possession of AI or possession of machines or circuitry, that I love that sort of thing. So I love the idea of Glitchtrap. I'm not a huge fan of the name. And here's the way that these things happen, okay? And this happened with Burntrap too. Whenever I'm in the planning phase with Steel Wool, we come up with temporary names for these characters, you know? Whenever we're doing the pre-production document, I'll say, oh, well, he's glitchy, we'll call him Glitchtrap. Oh yeah, he's Burn, we'll just call him Burntrap. But then those names get embedded in the source code because they use those temporary names also. And once they're in the source code, and once someone finds them in the source code, that's it. Like that's the canon name now, and there's nothing I can do about it. And hopefully we're learning our lessons going forward to maybe find I don't know, to just hone in on a better process there. Because yes, I love the character, not a huge fan of the name, but it is what it is for now. You know, it's the name.
I love Glitchtrap's name.
I actually do like Glitchtrap's name. It's not quite as good as Malhair, but it is funny to learn that it was just a name they threw out in the development document. And of course, you know, if you don't have another, you have to call him something in the source code. And if there is no other name for him at that point in time, you have to call him something. I wonder, I guess he's the anomaly. Is his canon is like the name Scott probably wanted him to have. Burntrap's the one. I want to know what Burntrap's canon name is supposed to be. I guess Scott's saying it's the canon name now because it's in the code. But I wonder if Burntrap ever got... I mean, you could argue, it's the Mimic. Yeah, obviously, fucking who cares? I'm saying, like, what's that... Even if it's the Mimic, what's that form of the Mimic called? It's like, we don't call William Afton Springtrap before he's Springtrap. And we don't call Spring Bonnie Springtrap before he's Springtrap. What is that variation? And we don't call Withered Freddy just Freddy. We call the incarnations of the characters different things. So I wonder what the intended name of Burntrap would have been if we didn't start calling him Burntrap because of the source code.
Could you think of a name, like, on the spot, like what you would want to call him or not?
Oh, I have no idea. But you know what? A good example is Mexus, you know, from Ruin. Now, that was a character where even in just my design of the game, I thought that through, and I came up with that. And I'm really happy with it. I really like that name. It's a really cool name. But now, see, if I didn't have one of those ready to fire off, I might have thought up something like, I don't know, Purple Trap or AI Trap, or just something temporary, and then that would have been the can name. That would have been so much worse than Mexus. So
after Help Wanted, we got Security Breach. Were you happy with the release of Security Breach when it first came out?
Security Breach, there's a really big story behind that.
I do find it interesting that even Mixus would have had the Trap moniker, that he's considered a trap as well. Is just any ominous rabbit that's not Bonnie directly Trap in Scott's mind? Because that's an interesting thing to consider. Especially for me in the TCG development scheme, that because trap is the suffix trap is specifically designated to the evil rabbits, basically, that aren't Bonnie. Which, to be fair, it's kind of how Scott's using it, but like Mixus isn't a trap; he's the Mixus system in the card game. So it's interesting to hear that there's a timeline where he might have been called like Anomaly Trap or something like that.
That was definitely a challenging period, and a lot of things just didn't align up perfectly for that, and there were a lot of reasons for that. I mean, obviously, I hear lots of studios and things kind of blame COVID for stuff, but there is a reason for that. COVID took well-structured work systems and suddenly scattered them and expected the work to continue to flow, and it just doesn't work that way. From my understanding, I'm pretty sure most, if not every, member of Steel Wool got scattered across the country and were trying to just carry on with the workflow, and it was just really difficult. I think that's really the only example when my idea of how a game was going to go was misaligned with how things were going with Steel Wool, and I had a specific story for this in mind. Okay, for Security Breach, I really did. I had a very specific story in mind, and it is very different than the one that got in the game. And I think a part of that is the way that I conveyed that to Steel Wool, because what I was trying to do was I was trying to tell Steel Wool to do specific things throughout the game, put specific items in specific places, have specific characters do certain things, meanwhile not telling them what the story plot was. Because in my head...
That is huge to learn. That is the biggest bombshell drop of this interview thus far. Okay, so that is actually... I know this is a weird thing. That's a huge boost to Tales games, in my opinion. And this potentially could explain so much about the Steel Wool era with Security Breach in specific. Because if you notice, people don't have that many questions about Help Wanted and Help Wanted 2. And even to an extent, not as many questions about Ruin, other than, little burn mimic debates and stuff like that. It's Tales and Security Breach are the big question marks a lot of people have. And I know he didn't say the books had that too, but if the books were getting this kind of do this and that, and the game had a bunch of this and that could explain so much of the weird scattered development we've had.
I was thinking, okay, when people find this, they will connect this to this to this, and it will all be revealed. And I thought I could do that without telling Steel Wool the story plot. That didn't work out very well, because they got all of these pieces and they thought it was their job to connect them in a way that made sense. And so really what you ended up having were the same pieces, but telling completely different stories. And since I was trying to kind of tell
that's how we get Cassidy. So I had to pause the recording there for a moment to deal with dog stuff. You probably heard them barking a ton in the background. So I had to go down there and figure out what the hell they were freaking out about. This, I think, is where we get Princess Cassidy. Because Steelwool trying to connect dots that they thought was their job to connect makes that so clear, and it makes it clear why it was removed. They thought it was their job to justify who this princess was. Scott left clues that there was something weird and abnormal about the princess, potentially, and that she was going to be the one to defeat Glitchtrap. And they felt, okay, you know, similar to Cassidy, who is the one who fights the traps? Cassidy, Vengeful Spirit timeline, because Andrew wasn't that popular narratively yet. He wasn't as widespread. Like, he existed technically, because Frights had completed at that point, but Stitch on Games was much quieter before Tales had Frailty to boost it.
Specific story with mine that went a certain direction. They were taking pieces they didn't fully understand and trying to craft a story out of them. And again, I don't blame them for that. I blame myself for that, because I guess what I should have done is just said, hey, here's the story. Here's why these pieces are here. Here's how they're supposed to connect. And I can give you a really easy example for this. And I'm hesitant to say this because I don't like messing with the lore, but I think in this case, it's okay. When it comes to Burntrap, originally, Burntrap was never supposed to move. He was supposed to just be something you saw in the corners, or like if you were walking past machinery, you might be able to peek in between two things and see him in the corner or propped up against a wall, almost like a some kind of decaying movie prop, and you never fully understood what his purpose was. And he had a very specific purpose, and I'm not going to say what that purpose was, but realistically, he never moved. Well, obviously that's not what we got in Security Breach. In Security Breach, we got a capsule opening and purple smoke flowing out and him climbing out and coming to get you. And so it's just not quite the same thing. So
now on the flip side, that to me is a huge Burn Mimic question mark, because I've always wondered what Burntrap was meant to be. And that kind of sounds like the Mimic, but it also totally does not sound like the Mimic from Tales. That sounds like the Mimic on paper, not what we got as the character, which almost makes me wonder if Tales had to change the Mimic, like, mid-background development to justify it being this more active character. And, or, on the other flip side, Burntrap was never meant to be the Mimic. I mean, or at least isn't what we think of as the modern Mimic, if that makes sense. It's not the one we saw in Ruin, who chased you down and was going to break metal and stuff to get to you.
But anyway, it didn't turn out the way anybody wanted. But hey, whenever that happens, just like whenever I stepped in it a little bit with FNAF World, me and Steelwool got together. We were like, look, all that matters now is making things right by the fan base. That's all that matters. We all had the best intentions going on. We all wanted to make a good product, and we went in and we made Ruin for it, and I hope that redeemed the game, and I feel like it did, because I think it was really great. And anything that we do going forward that continues that story or has those same themes, I think we're just going to be in a much better situation to continue on
here, because I feel like the things we were probably the most afraid of for FNAF's lore just were eased for me. Because if Security Breach was just a lot of miscommunications, then that gives me hope that moving forward, lore will be more easy to follow and understand. So that does confirm that something weird happened with Burntrap that changed.
The Ruin DLC came out a year ago now, which is crazy to think about. Time's going so quickly, and the fan reaction to that was amazing. Everybody loved it, and everybody's looking forward to what's next. The ending of Ruin, with a specific character that came out, a new character into the games, the Mimic. Any thoughts on the Mimic?
I cannot share any thoughts on the Mimic, other than I really like that character. This is a character that I really like and I'm really excited about. I think it's a really terrific antagonist, and I don't think it's the last that we've seen of the Mimic. That's all I'll say.
Yes. With that, do you have a favourite character in the Steelwool era of games?
I don't have much to say about, like, Scott didn't have much to say on the Mimic. That just means we haven't seen a lot about him.
I mean, Music Man is too obvious of an answer, right? I mean, I think all those characters turned out great. In fact, I think this is why it's hard to pick a favorite, because all of them turned out so well. You know, I've always really liked Vanny as a character. I don't think that Vanny was utilized to her fullest potential, and so hopefully we'll see another opportunity for Vanny to return as well. We'll see.
Ooh.
So we have not seen the last of Vanny. That's really interesting. This is what I said. People were like, "Oh, there's going to be no lore questions. Who cares about the interview?" Not many people, but a handful. And I'm like, but there's always been lore in the interviews, every single one. And this is one of those examples. There was a lot of reason to think Vanny was done. We had seen all of her story, but it seems like she's going to still be around somewhat.
Okay. Moving on to the books. So the books have been amazing. I've been doing little summary videos on the channel with Fazbear Frights. That was awesome. How has it been working on Fazbear Frights?
It's actually really enjoyable. It's probably one of the most enjoyable things that I do, because I just get to think up a really scary scenario, and then I create maybe a 10 to 15 page story out of it. And then I have writers that I work with, obviously, and they take that and they really flesh it out and fill it out and add the details and turn it into a full-length story. And
that explains so many of the short stories. I've stood by that some of the stories feel like they are 10-page stories extended out to 50. And they literally are in some instances. So this actually does. I've always wondered how much Scott was involved with in the books, and it seems like he does more than even I thought. Not even I. Even I implies I thought highly of it than I think most people thought. It's still interesting to see that there's a lot written into those stories, which does make me really wonder what some of the stories are. Like, what are the Scott versions of these stories? That's a really interesting one to think about.
You get to kind of just really see it come to life. So it's been really enjoyable, and that's something that I really enjoy. It's funny because it's one of those things where, as long as I know that that's something that's happening in my life, I might be at the gym or I might be watching a show, and then suddenly something will come to mind, and I'll be like, "Oh man, this is gonna make a great story," and I get right home and I start working on it.
Do you have a favorite story out of all of them?
I think my favorite story it's probably Bunny Call. I know that's kind of an oddball choice, but there's a reason for it. It's because some of these stories are based on my real life experiences. Bunny Call is not completely made up. I used to take my family to a family summer.
I wondered about that when I read that. So I'm like, wow, this sounds like a very Scott-like character. I don't remember the main character's name because I've read Bunny Call once and never again. But that stuck with me. That, like, the idea of a family man who's kind of upset with his family but still, like, very, very much cares at the end of the day.
Summer camp. Okay, this is my two oldest boys were maybe 11 and 12 at the time. Or no, I bet they were 13 and 14. It's hard to remember exactly when this was. But then I had younger two that were just babies still. And whenever we showed up at camp and we were all in the auditorium signing up for activities, it was rafting and boating. One of the things you could sign up for was a panda call. Okay. And a panda call it's a very deceiving title, because what that meant is that early in the morning, a bunch of the camp counselors dressed as killer clowns would come into your cabin and scare the crap out of your kids to wake them up early and drag them off to their daily activities. And so I signed up my two oldest, Ian and Braden, my old beta testers, from whenever they, all their lives testing my games. I signed them up for it. And I thought, oh yeah, this will be kind of fun. It was kind of fun until the next morning started rolling around. I started thinking about what I'd done, because then the next morning I woke up at 5 a.m. and I realized they're out there somewhere. Like this is happening right now. And I started listening for screams, and I started listening for noises, and I even snuck out and went outside. Like it was dark and there were crickets chirping, and I was looking around, and I just thought to myself, somewhere out here in the dark in these trees are a bunch of clowns, and they're coming to my cabin. And it was a really, really scary sensation. And so I just went back inside, and I looked at my family sleeping. I looked at my baby sleeping, and my kids and my wife, and I was like, what have I done? Like, what have I done? Of course it ended up not being a big deal, because then I just heard a soft knock at the door, and I opened it, and there was a row of killer clowns. I said, never mind, you guys, and they just walked on. And so it wasn't a big deal, but it was still a really eerie feeling like I had signed up for something that I'd regretted and I couldn't undo it, you know? And so I based a Bunny Call on that.
Oh, that's awesome. You said that you've got relatable stories. Do you have a relatable story with Fazgoo?
Look, okay. Listen, anytime there's a series of a whole bunch of different things, you're going to have some that are great, and then some there's like, well, like what was going on with this? You know, I don't know how to explain the Fazgoo. I'm sure I had something in mind that was really great, but you know, they can't all be winners. Now I will say a couple of the other ones that had real life connections. You know, sometimes you hear about people talking about their sleep paralysis demons or whatever. That's never really made sense to me, but now it kind of makes sense to me, and I don't know why it does. Yeah, every once in a while, a person you'll wake up, but you'll still be paralyzed in your sleep, and for some reason, I guess in that moment, you're still half dreaming, and so you have a tendency to still maybe see something before you fully wake up. And the Blackbird creature was mine. That creature on the cover of Blackbird is my sleep paralysis demon, because I was on vacation, I was by myself, and I don't know what the circumstances were. I feel like I was taking a midday nap, but I woke up with a jolt, and for a split second, I saw that thing standing over me. And
that's another one that explains a lot to me, honestly. Blackbird is one of the more intimidating Frights characters. Like, compared to Fazgoo, who's kind of silly. I mean, Fazgoo's creepy in description, but silly in practice, kind of. Blackbird actually is kind of intense. So that doesn't shock me.
I couldn't move, and my body was tingling, and I was just frozen up, and I was just so disoriented after that. But I never forgot that, and I knew immediately after that, it's like, I've got to get this into a story somewhere, like this crazy looking creature.
That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. I've never had sleep paralysis, so I don't know what my creature would look like, but I hope it doesn't look like that.
I don't think it's a normal experience. I don't think it's an experience you should want to have. I don't feel like it's a healthy thing. So if that hasn't happened to you, I think you're in a good place.
Do you have a least favorite story?
I don't know. I think it probably might be the Fazgoo, or no. I mean, come on. It's got to be the one where the guy gets pregnant with Springtrap's baby. I'm not sure what I was thinking about. You know, again, that's one of those things where, oh man, this is going to be really creepy. But then you step back and look at it from afar, and you're like, I don't know if this is a good idea. And I swear I wasn't picking on MatPat. That wasn't a story designed with MatPat in mind. It really, really wasn't. You know, listen, whenever you're doing these stories for this long, eventually you just run out of names, and you're going to cover all the names, you know? Yeah. Eventually I'll get around to Dawko, you know? And so if you see Dawko in one of these stories, it's not something personal. It's just because I ran out of names, you know?
I don't know. Dawko is a very specific name that you'd have to...
But Dawkins, however...
to get to.
I probably have a few more to go through before I get to that, so you don't have anything to worry about.
When doing my summary videos, and I know a lot of people say the same, people who loved Goosebumps when they were kids find these really relatable, right? And I know kids at school now read Fazbear Frights like they're Goosebumps books. And as a kid, my favourite TV show was Goosebumps. Would you ever think about or like the idea of Fazbear Frights ever being like a TV show like Goosebumps?
Fuck.
Where it's like a series of some of the best stories or something adapted?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's something that can definitely happen. Especially now that the first movie came out and was successful. I think that really opens the door to lots of other potential opportunities. The only thing to be mindful of is I don't want to oversaturate the market and just create too much. And I think that sometimes we get a little bit of that where franchises have movies and too many TV shows, and it just kind of waters everything down. But I really do like that idea, and it is definitely something that could happen for sure.
Awesome. So
That's
the
cool.
next
That he
segment-
didn't say that like, oh, maybe. No, he was like, no, definitely, it's possible. But it doesn't sound like it's in the works right now. But I actually, the Stitch Wraith, seeing that prop come to life would be jaw dropping to me, because, I mean, the Lady Fizzy art doesn't, and the Pinky Pills art for the Stitch Wraith doesn't quite do the design justice to me. Because, to be completely honest, as much as I haven't been big on Frights being in the game continuity or Stitchline being in the game continuity, I stand by that Jake and the Stitch Wraith, less so Andrew, and Larson are some of the characters I would love to see in the game universe. And that's kind of why it's become hard for me to be like, oh yeah, I don't think Stitchline Games is true, because it's like, part of me does want it to be true, because I do like the idea of the story. I just feel it's kind of unnecessary in a lot of regards, because I feel like you could have just had, if you really wanted the what I've nicknamed the Blackjack arc, referencing Day Shift of Freddy's, because I think Blackjack handles what Andrew's character was going for probably better than Andrew does, to be completely honest, which is strange because it's such a weird universe, with so many crazy lines. Like, I think if I said some of the dialogue in this tone of a video, I would get demonetized, to be completely honest. But Blackjack, the desperation and frustration to feel redeemed and feel like you matter and won't be forgotten, which is what I feel like they were setting up with Andrew with Blackjack. And just being torn away from this person you want to torment and kill, and being, because it's so, Blackjack seems so obsessive and depressed and frustrated with it in Day Shift, that like tearing him away from Henry in that series, it feels like it's the hardest thing he's done in his afterlife ever. Whereas Andrew just kind of gets blown away from William and then has amnesia and doesn't even remember what the real weight of it all was, just that he was angry. And it's like, there's an interesting, you could have done an interesting Mewtwo-esque thing where it's like, if you don't know the Birth of Mewtwo short, where Mewtwo goes through the trauma of losing the other test subjects, including Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, and Amber too. Amber being the daughter of the lead scientist who worked on Mewtwo, who died earlier, and this is the hypothetical clone of her. Losing, and Mewtwo's psychic, he can link to all of them, and losing them all because they weren't the ultimate Pokemon is like this traumatizing, devastating moment for him. And they try to, because he's meant to be this war machine Pokemon, they try to wipe his memory so he won't be held back by that empathy and hurt people. And obviously that backfires, because he's left with all these feelings of grief and rage and sorrow, but has no reason to justify it anymore. So all you can feel is sadness with no output anymore. And that's why it's so easy for him to hate humanity when he's experimented on and forced to do all these things. That's what makes Mewtwo such an interesting goddamn character in that first movie. And that's what carries that movie, in my opinion. Because if you take that away, Mewtwo's just kind of a cool antagonist and that's it. But you aren't thinking about what this all means to him without that. And Andrew, I feel like they could have done something like that, where he's stuck with all this regret and hatred and wishing William would die, but doesn't remember why anymore. And I feel like they could have made this interesting arc where he starts making progress and fully becomes a good person and kind of reformed by Jake, but then he gets his memories back, and it's like, no, I still hate William, but at the same time I want to move on because I've been helped to realize that I can move on. It's like you can have the conflict between the two halves of them. There's actually a story series idea I've had that has that as a big focus, where it's basically like in this kind of alternate dimension or pocket dimension thing, where one of the disciples of like the god of death is keeping their favorite souls there. And none of them remember who they were in life. And eventually, at the very end, after they did all this work to earn their chance to live again, they start getting their memories back. And some of them realize, oh, the main character especially, she realizes, holy shit, is this who I was? I was kind of insane in some areas. And it's kind of like this double back of like, is this what I was? And coming to terms with that, and like by the end of the series, when she is brought back, because they're kind of fighting for their chance to come back, the version of her that gets brought back is a better person than the one who died, if that makes sense. And Andrew just gets kicked out of the story, and it's the lamest part of it, because it's like he didn't even need to be there. Given that Eleanor persists after Afton and all the other souls and Andrew have moved on, that leads me to believe that the agony is not bound to whatever infected it, you know? You get that idea. Which means we didn't even need Andrew and Afton to be in the story. We could have just had Jake come to sentience and discover all these haunted things when he's in Taggart's lab. And be like, this is horrible. I can't believe these exist. And then he goes around to like find the various creatures and stuff. And then he encounters Eleanor. Like, yeah, he doesn't have a person to talk to, but also, you know, as I mentioned, they don't really take advantage of the short story format. You typically give a character to talk to in a screenplay where you can't do as much internal narration because it's just not a thing in the West, really, for filmmaking. But they kind of... Andrew feels like he's that, but because there are these short snippets at the end of the books, he doesn't feel like he can... It doesn't feel necessary, really. Like, did we need him to talk to Andrew, really? Like, especially if we're not going to fully do the theoretical redemption story of Andrew, and just kind of like, oh yeah, he became slightly better and then he left because Jake freed him. It feels a little strange. It almost makes me wonder if the Stingers were meant to be extended out kind of like the others and kind of didn't, and that's why they're this weird janky pacing. Or if he wrote an outline for every single Stinger in 10 pages. Like, all the Stingers were just 10 pages of notes that had to be spread across 12 books. It almost makes me wonder that.
And is the FNAF movie. I've got some questions for you, Scott. First off, I absolutely loved the movie, as you know, and I know a lot of people did as well. The fans absolutely loved it, and it did really well at the box office as well. Super successful. Congratulations to you, Blumhouse, Universal. So yeah, first question is, how was working on the first FNAF movie after waiting for so long, after announcing it back in 2015? Well, you emailed me back in 2015 about it. I still remember that email. But yeah, how was it?
It took a really long time to get off the ground, really just because of the screenplay. But after the screenplay was really locked in, from there, all the wheels started turning, you know, all the engines fired, and it took off. And it was a really fun experience from there. And really the screenplay just had a lot of challenges because of what it was. And it's really, you know, throughout all of those years, I worked with a lot of different directors, a lot of different writers, a lot of really talented people that eventually would end up leaving the project, but still really talented people. And it was really just a matter of there's just material that's difficult to translate to the screen. And one of the biggest issues is the animatronics, obviously being the monsters in the monster movie. If I were to approach any writer of a horror movie or any director and say, okay, here are your monsters, go make a monster movie with them, that's easy. You know, you give them all a knife, you go in, you just make your generic slasher, but just have it be, you know, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy doing the slashing. The nuance here is that these animatronics are possessed by the spirits of kids. And these are innocent kids. These are victims themselves. So it's very, very difficult
I was about to say, but I kind of got where he's going, so I didn't say it, but let's keep going. This is absolutely what's cool about FNAF to me.
still have a horror movie, still have those kills that you need, but still preserve the innocence of those kids. And it's a really difficult thing to do. And there were several screenplays that did not hit that mark. And I think I was more cautious about that and more picky about that than anything else. If kind of the innocence of those spirits was not preserved properly, I wasn't going to go forward with it. And so, one quick example is the way that we were able to have a couple of kills in the movie was obviously the vandals. You have a group of people who are breaking in, they're disrespecting the place, they're trashing the place, they're there with bad intentions, and then you combine that with the fact that these animatronics are, the spirits in them are these kids that are basically very confused and lost, animals backed into a corner, and kind of left with this impression that adults are out to get them. And then you have these violent adults breaking in. And so it allows you to have that kill count while still being like, well, I can kind of see how that might happen. It was a tricky thing to do, but I think we were able to accomplish that.
Manipulated by William Afton still as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. The drawing on the wall was also kind of this layer, this blanket of manipulation over them all. So all those things combined, you could see how these actions could happen while it not necessarily being the fault of the kids.
With the fort scene as well, I loved the fort scene. I know some people were a bit confused by that, like why are they building a fort? But I got it straight away. You just want to show the audience that they're just kids, right? Were you happy with the first movie and how it came out?
Yes,
I do say I think the 14's a little long, all things considered. But no, it is necessary to really illustrate who these characters are. Because Scott is right that if you don't have something there, it's just, oh, they're kind of nice to Abby. And that's it. It's a kind of just like, oh yeah, they're like kids, whatever. Because they are kids. But you don't really get why they would want her to be there forever. If that makes sense. Even if they're manipulated and confused and all that. They don't get that motivation if there isn't something very definitive about their connection.
I am very happy. I mean, look, anytime anybody, I think pretty much anybody who's been through a process like this would be able to look back, and I do this with my games too. You look back and you're like, well, I wish I'd tweaked this. Oh, maybe this could have been like this, or maybe this could have been like that. But you have to just really take a step back and look at it as a whole, and where it came from, all the things that could have gone wrong, and all the things that went right, and just be really grateful that so many things just fell into place. And I can give you a really quick example of why I don't want to second guess too much. At the 11th hour of this movie coming together, we still really didn't have a music composer, and I'd really wanted an animated intro. I was really pushing to have that 8-bit animated intro, but we didn't have anybody, and really not really anybody to have an idea of what kind of music we were looking for. 11th hour, Newton Brothers come in and they write out that banger of a track, like absolute insane. Like I listened to that the first time and I was like, wait a minute, do I have a theme song? Does Five Nights at Freddy's have a theme song? And I called Emma Tammy on the phone. I was like, wait, do we have a theme song now? Like, I can't tell you how excited I was over that. And you better believe you're going to hear that again at the beginning of the second movie too. I mean, that was just so incredible. The Newton Brothers just knocked that out of the park.
That track does capture, because it feels 8-bit, but it also feels like it represents the supernatural half very well. I do wonder if we're going to get more covers of that, because I know he's saying we're going to hear it in the FNAF movie too, but I'm assuming they're not just going to reuse the exact track.
So many things went right that I don't think I'm going to dwell too much on, what I would go back and try to do differently.
As we know, the movie was a major hit in 2023, super successful, the biggest horror movie of 2023 as well. How does that feel, seeing that happen?
It's nice. That part is nice. It's more important to me that if the critics had loved it, but the fan base was grumbling and saying, "Wait, this isn't how it is in the lore. Wait, we didn't like this. I don't like how they did this, and this." And the fan base was unhappy. That would be a failure to me. I'm perfectly happy with all the critics hating it and the fan base reacting positively to it. So yes, it is nice that the movie was successful. However, that is not the correct metric by which to judge the success of this movie. And in fact, opening night, which was Thursday night, where I am, I went to the very first showing, and the theater was pretty much empty. There were only a couple other people in there, but it was a 1 o'clock showing. So, but still, I saw that as kind of a bad sign. But I just watched it anyway. Then I went to the next showing, which was just later in the evening, and I told myself I wasn't going to go online. I wasn't going to read any reviews. I had already told everybody at Blumhouse, and I told my legal team, don't talk to me, don't call me, don't email me, don't send me charts, don't send me facts or figures. I don't want to hear anything about anything. I'm going through this whole weekend blind. I just want to experience what everybody else is experiencing. Well, before I went into that second showing, I was just by myself. And then later that evening, my whole family was coming into town, by the way. My whole family was going to come into town and watch the movie with me that night. But this showing, I was still sitting by myself. I was checking my email, and I accidentally saw one of the reviews. And I saw that it was terrible. And that opened the floodgates, and I went and started reading all of the other reviews. And I immediately texted my family saying, don't come. Don't come. This is over. I want to be by myself. And I was already thinking in my head, like, how am I going to write a letter to Blumhouse apologizing for this? How am I going to write a letter to the fans apologizing to this for just wasting everybody's time? And I was just incredibly depressed. But somehow Jason Blum caught wind of this. I don't know who I asked a question to or what I said, but he started just bombarding me with text messages saying, Scott, the fans love it. The fans love it. The movie's a big hit. Everything's great. He was just in all caps, everything all caps. My phone was just blowing with all caps texts. And so he really talked me through that to try to encourage me that even though the critics hated it, there was a lot there was a lot to be loved there by the fans. And so then I had my family come into town anyway, and we just sat in a packed theater and listened to the cheers and enthusiasm, and it really lifted my spirits. But for a couple of hours there, man, I was pretty distraught. I thought the whole thing was just a complete disaster.
But it wasn't.
But it wasn't. It all worked out okay. It all worked out okay.
Yeah.
And again, the movie's not perfect. There's definitely room to improve. But yeah, I'm definitely happy that it was in general received well by the fan base.
The second movie, which is, it's been announced that it's going to be coming out in 2025. Is it December 2025?
Yeah, December 5th, 2025, I think.
Is there anything exciting to talk about on the second movie? Anything you want to say?
I'm not going to give away too many details. But I will say that I'm following kind of the same formula where the first movie is focused on the first game. So I'm going to try to carry on that tradition onward with future movies. And I think that is absolutely the way to go. And I think everyone's going to be really, really excited for what's planned for the second one. The first one was really challenging because it's so much setup. It's like, how do you establish all of this? But now that we have that launch pad, where to go from there came a lot just more natural. It felt a lot more natural. And we were able to really craft just a really great...
That's always a thing with these movies, is like the first movie is often the best one and the hardest one to make. And sometimes the second movie can be the best one because of this factor, where once you've gone through the hurdle of getting everything that will be to be, it can all come together, and then you have every piece moving forward there. That's something I've always toyed with, like, what if I rewrote Neon Dynamo Chapter 1 or made it into, like, a screenplay for an episode or something like that, for, like, a pilot. And it's the one I think would be the hardest to revisit, because Chapter 1, I just throw you in. There is no, like, this is Rust Pale-Soul, 17-year-old living in Portland who stumbles upon a magical device called the Neon Dynamo spaceship, etc. Like, there's nothing like that. It's also a good thing I didn't establish Rust's age in Chapter 1, because he was meant to be 15 or 16 originally, but I settled on 17 because I wanted his 18th birthday to be in space. because that would really establish the homesick angle of his character. That, you know, as much as he loves being in space and all these things he could never do on Earth, because especially in this universe's Earth where superhumans are, it's about as bad as the mutants get in X-Men. In some areas worse, some areas better. It's not as like, we are sending sentinels to hunt down the mutants. It's not like that. It's more, but it is like, oh, it's a nationwide law that you can charge people double their rent if they're superhuman because they're considered a liability. You can just charge people more for being theoretically more powerful. For anything, basically. I think I had like a random joke that like in Ohio, you have an extra sales tax if you look like you might be a superhuman. Not even if you are, but if you cannot prove you aren't, they can just charge you more money for something. That's what it's like. In some ways, it's kind of worse because the mutants didn't really have that for the most part, to my knowledge. But I'm not super familiar with X-Men. But it's better because you don't have the Sentinels hunting you down. So Rust is like better off in that front because space doesn't, a lot of overworld, the kind of interstellar stuff that Rust's been dealing with in the comic, it doesn't have that kind of baggage behind it. Superhumans are seen as necessary because so many things are magical and fantastical in space. Like, there's just an entire species of dragons that are like living tanks in terms of their durability and capability of fighting. So the idea of, oh, I can shoot sparks isn't that impressive relative to the Infernians who, like, I haven't really gotten to the Infernians in Neon Dynamo lore, but the realistic implication of a species of entirely sorcerers by just birth, from birth, they're capable of magic. With their most powerful members being just like these, like, it would be like if Gandalf just showed up mid-World War II, is how I would explain it. And it was just like, oh, yep, I'm here. I'm going to kick some ass. That's kind of what the Infernians are like. But even though I've drawn a ton of concept art for them, including in Freddy X Dynamo, the joke Freddy and Friends Neon Dynamo crossover I do sometimes. Lucy appeared in that, and just casually she blows up Freddy's Pizzeria for a bit. And she's the most powerful Infernian we see in Neon Dynamo, really. But that's just an example of like, yeah, it's a joke, but that's something she could actually have done, just like without thinking about it, doing something like that. I know it's not like the biggest destruction feat, but when it's just a casual fight or flight response to something that mildly scares her, and that's not even non-canon in terms of what she could do, you know, it's something that I think about, like, world building. But getting to that point is so much harder. Establishing who, because that's what the one thing I don't like about chapter 1 is we get a loose vibe for who Alex and Rust are, but Alex doesn't feel as much of a hard ass as he kind of is in chapter 1. And you don't get the kind, not edge that Rust has, but that almost, Akira Toriyama described Goku as having like this poison in him that was the desire to fight. Rust occasionally has moments like that, and you can see that in, I want to say, chapter 5, and 4, where it's like, oh, this is a cool alien thing I can fight. It's probably durable to handle my blast, and then the joke with him fighting Nausea, the slime monster, the slime sentinel, is he just assumed, oh, in sci-fi, slimes regenerate. So even if I blast this thing, it will just regenerate, and it doesn't. I mean, it might be able to over time. Over the course of like 4 years, it might be able to heal itself. But right now, it's basically dead. But that's kind of the bit with those first few chapters is it's more just getting characters to meet characters and learn who each other are. I would say the first real fight scene of the series is Rust versus Thorns. And even then, that's where you kind of start seeing the characterization of the two a bit better, between like Alex, Rust, and Rain. Even Rain, I still want a bit more time to demonstrate her personality. Chapter 8 has done that a little bit, but I haven't finished Chapter 8 technically.
Great story, I think, and I'm really excited about it. And I won't say anything more, but I'm really hopeful that everyone's gonna really love what's gonna come around December 2025.
Yeah, so exciting. And is Emma back and everything?
Oh yes, yeah,
well?
Emma's gonna be back. She did such a great job on that first one, you know.
Yeah, that's really good, having the same director. So now we're going to be talking about Into the Pit, the new game that's coming out by Mega Cat Studios. We just got the trailer, another trailer, a couple like last week, and it looks amazing. It looks so good. How has it been working on the game based on a Fazbear Fright story?
It's definitely been a unique experience. You know, I first started talking to Meg. I mean, it's been years and years since that game has been in development, and originally it was just supposed to be a little novelty one-off. Like, oh yeah, here's this little company that makes 16-bit cartridges, and that was immediately appealing to me because I'm all about the Super Nintendo. And so if I could make something that would come on the Super Nintendo cartridge, you know, sign me up. That was the most exciting thing, the most exciting product I'd ever worked on. It was still just supposed to be a novelty, but as the development went on, everybody was looking at it thinking, this looks pretty good. This actually looks really good. And so they just kept on going with it. They could have stopped a lot sooner, and they could have stopped with just a little simple novelty game, but they just kept going. And I kept looking at thinking, yeah, keep going. And they kept going, and I would keep looking at it. It just turned into this big, full-fledged, full-sized game. So we obviously decided to venture away from strictly the cartridges, so that everybody can be able to play it on Steam and everything. But it's really unique. It's just a really, really unique game, and I do love that it really gets into just this really gritty these kind of gritty graphics that I haven't seen since, well, I guess since the late 90s, whenever you had those point and click type adventures and you had that real kind of that pixelated art style that can be really creepy at times. I don't know. It's going to be a really unique experience, and I think that everyone's going to really be excited about it. I really do.
Awesome. I can't wait to play it. How has it been working with Mega Cat Studios then?
Oh, it's been great. It's been really great. I really haven't had to give them, I mean, I have had to give them direction, but for the most part, it's been weird. They would go into the hole for 6, 7, 8 months at a time, and I wouldn't hear anything from them, to the point where I thought, is this okay? And I would even, you know, I talk to the other people that I work with, like, is this game okay? Is this going to be okay? Are they okay? Do I need to check on this? Do we need to check on them over there? But then I would get an update, and it would just be all this crazy new stuff and all this crazy detail, this fluid animation. It's just crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. And then they'd go back into the hole again for 5, 6, 7 months. And then we just repeat that cycle. But now here we are finally at the end of that road. And I think it's just turned out really great. Like I said, really unique. And I think everybody's going to really like it.
The reaction to the trailer has been amazing.
It is probably, to me, the biggest hype FNAF game right now. Other than like Joy of Creation, but like Joy of Creation is almost in its own category of cool, if that makes sense. I've mentioned before on streams and stuff that one of, if not my favorite point and click series of all time is the Script Welder saga between Deep Sleep and Don't Escape, as well as Frambo, which is completely different, but and very tonally different between Deep Sleep and Frambo, but those are some of my favorite games of all time, period. So seeing that the FNAF might get an entry with a similar feel to, Scott is right, there's something different about the pixelated fluid art style that you don't get in a hand-drawn as much. Frambo was able to get, I would say, close to it relatively, to be honest. For like the kind of beauty but ugliness of it all, if that makes sense. And Frambo has its own kind of creep factor, and because it has this pseudo drawn aesthetic to it, like the way Remore moves in cutscenes because it has to be drawn, but also is like kind of tweened a little, is really uncanny, and it's kind of what makes him cool when he appears. Itward has that too, where it's like they look so jank, but that makes them creepy and cool. Whereas Pit Trap, I don't know if we're gonna get a proper name for him in this. Looks so, like I said, deep sleep like, but even more fluid and detailed.
All positive feedback about it. Super excited. People love it. The story of Into the Pit as well. Into the Pit's probably my favourite Fazbear Fright story. So with all the positive feedback about it,
I think it's mine too, to be honest. I really like Real Jake and stuff like that, and some of the other more, I would say the stories with a deeper edge to them. But as of like, this feels like a Five Nights at Freddy's story. It's up there, man. I don't know what. Even Step Closer, which I kind of like, because I like that Pete isn't like an irredeemable asshat, which some of the I feel like if Step Closer was in book 9 or 8, Pete would have been an irredeemable asshat because so many of the kids become that in those in that like last chunk. But the fact that like, hey, even if Pete's a bit of a jerk, he still cares. He's still there. And Oswald is probably my favorite of the standalone stories protagonists, because like I also like Coming Home and all that, because it's another one that has the deep edge with Susie and like the loss and all that. But Susie kind of could have been any lost family member. It just happens that she's the one that's Sheikah, if that makes sense. And but whereas Oswald's story, I'm like, I don't think this would have worked without the context of Five Nights at Freddy's. If you don't have the ominous nature of seeing Spring Bonnie around the pizzeria in the first flashbacks, you don't get that ominous sense of dread of knowing what's happening next. You wouldn't have the time traveling ball pit mechanic concept if it wasn't in a kid's pizzeria. So it has to be something like that. Maybe you could have like a closet in an old mansion or something like that, but like, why would a kid keep going there? And why would he? Because like, there's a bit with that in the story. And you also don't have Oswald's kind of self-reflection on his friends and what he thinks of as his friends. And you don't get the shock of the bodies at all if you don't have like the context of FNAF. Like it feels the most FNAF of the vast majority of Fright stories, because so many of them feel like they last minute decide they're Five Nights at Freddy's related. Like some of them get there, some of them don't. It's a whole thing. Wow, there's a lot left.
What do you see for the future of FNAF spin-offs made by other studios in the future?
Oh, it's definitely a possibility. In fact, I'd really like them to start working on Fetch. I think Fetch would make a really good game after this. You know, some stories obviously cater more toward being a good game than others, but there's something really scary about the thought of something always being out there and kind of watching your house, and then trying to come in and do things for you. Like, this is kind of a scary thought. The thought that I might be online shopping and looking for a specific thing, and somehow something out there is hearing that and receiving that, and then gonna come to me, sneak inside and put it somewhere without me knowing that it was there. It's just a creepy.
That sounds creepier than Fetch actually was, to be honest. Not that Fetch just completely downplays that, but that's almost more impressive to me. That, once again, it makes me wonder, what were the demo scripts that Scott wrote for each story?
Scenario. It's a creepy setup, and I think it'd be a really cool game to have to stop this thing, because obviously Fetch was out doing a lot of menacing things to have to sneak around a neighborhood and stop this thing that's sneaking around so undetected. I don't know. I think it'd be a really cool game. So hopefully that'll be the next project. We'll see.
As the franchise has grown bigger, what challenges have you faced with running a franchise of this size? Is there anything you could think you could be doing better?
I think something I should have maybe been doing better is I should have had a better structure in place as far as people to talk to the fan base. You know, I've always kept that on myself all during the years, and in the early years, I think that worked great because it was a little indie game, a little indie community, and then me, the indie dev, just chatting with the community and talking. But as the years go by and the franchise gets bigger and bigger, I don't know. I feel like I've slowly kind of lost touch with the fan base. Unfortunately, it's not that same. It's not that same relationship that it used to be. I really used to enjoy chatting with everybody and just kind of I don't know. And I guess that's expected because FNAF is more of a big, it's kind of just kind of a bigger thing now, and it's bigger than one person, and I can't just pretend like I can hop online and chat with everybody and solve everybody's problems anymore. Used to, I kind of could. I could just go in there and chat with everybody and resolve little problems as if it was like just a squabble on a forum. I can always just step in and solve it, but it's just not the same. And I think that I should have realized that sooner. And I'm really only realizing that this year, that I really need to have a better structure in place. You know, and the fan base deserves that. The franchise deserves that. The fan base deserves that, to have more people in charge and running a Twitter page and official news feeds, you know, an official news feed, so that there's not so much confusion about what's real and what's not real, and real news and fake news, and is this confirmed, is this not confirmed. You know, I could have avoided years of that if I just kind of had a better structure in place with people to listen to, and like I said, a news feed and someone else to just provide better answers to the fan base. So I'm trying to get all that in place. And I really think I think it would just better serve the fan base. And I think everybody would be a little happier if it's not just me trying to jump in and straighten things out when needed.
Yeah, I think the Twitter's a great idea.
Yeah.
We're recording this in June, but you know, it was announced today. The schedule for what's coming out during that week is really exciting and really good. So people, you know, can get excited for the anniversary. They kind of know what's coming, which is really exciting. And you know,
I don't have much to say on this final section. I'm just going to kind of let them talk. I'm actually at this point genuinely wondering about not releasing this reaction, because it's like, you know, I have some stuff to say here and there, but a lot of this is kind of self-explanatory.
Communication like that, you know, it's you know, people have really appreciated that. So thank you for doing that, and looking forward to seeing what happens next on the Twitter, what they announce. And apart from the second movie to look forward to, is there anything else you could hint at for the future? Any future titles or any little hints to get people excited for the future?
One of the good things is going to be coming from Steel Wool, but that's going to be announced here in this same week that your interview is going to air. So I think that's it. In fact, I'm not sure if it was right before this or right after this.
Yeah,
it might have been right after this.
Yesterday.
Okay. And obviously everybody knows about the movie, and right now the books are these interactive books, which I read things like that growing up, and so I'm excited about those. And I've tried to add some depth into those to where you can actually collect items in them and things like that. So it's really not just about picking a path; it's about picking a path and getting something, and then going to the other path and being able to use something. So it makes it more interesting and more intricate. But yeah, I mean, that's the plan for movies, games, and books. And I already told you my hope for the next Mega Cat game, and and there is another game planned with Steel Wool, but that's not going to be announced for a while yet. So I can't talk about that. But there is something down the pipe.
Okay.
So interesting. So what Steel Wool's working on might not be a game.
even beyond what's being announced this week, there's something beyond. But I can't talk about that.
Yeah. So I won't spoil anything. But I read the week before, guys, and it is good. So please.
Cool. because VIP was fun and all, but it did feel like a demo for what the interactive books are. It didn't feel like a big physical book I would read myself and be like, oh, this and that, Lone Wolf, whatever.
You know,
if you ever read the Lone Wolf Choose Your Own Adventure books, which I haven't really, but I've been really interested in them lately, especially with FNAF getting Choose Your Own Adventure books.
When it comes out, I'm looking forward to the Into the Pit one. VIP is the interactive novel VIP another one as well?
Yes, yeah. VIP it's one that I did with Scholastic, just like the others, but it's just going to be free. It's specifically for this event. I mean, I might still be included in a box set later down the road, but no, for this week, it was made specifically for this event, by the same author, I believe, as the week before. So if you enjoyed that one, you'll enjoy VIP. And I really love the story for VIP. I'm not going to ruin it, but it might be one of my favorites. So hopefully everybody really enjoys that.
That's awesome. I'm pretty sure it comes out before the interview. So
okay, yeah, great.
Future me,
who does?
If you're watching, you probably loved it. There is a collab announcement tomorrow from this interview. Whatever it is, I don't know. But it seems that you've been more open with collaborations with games recently. The Funko one as well. Are you more open to more collabs since we last spoke during the last interview? Like, would you be interested in whatever it is? I don't know, like Fortnite or Dead by Daylight. Have those popped into your head at all? Or
I'm very careful with collaborations because I want to protect the brand and I want to make sure that Five Nights at Freddy's stays as Five Nights at Freddy's. And there are some games where even if I really enjoy the game, it just doesn't feel like a good match. It feels like a mismatch. The brand integrity is the most important thing for me, and keeping everything feeling like it belongs. And so that's really been my only hesitancy. I feel like I am branching out a little bit, and I am a little bit more open to those things than maybe I was in the early years, but I'm still very careful about it. We'll just see. We'll see how things go.
Okay. Anything else you would like to add to finish off the interview?
Let's see here. No, I mean, I think things are in a good place, and like I said, I think that the things that are on the horizon are all things to be excited about, and I think that everybody's going to really enjoy. The things that the fan base really going to enjoy. And I wish I could talk about those more, but I don't feel like I can.
So do you think we're going to have another interview in 10 years time?
It doesn't have to be 10 years. We can try to do this a little bit more often.
But what, every 5 years?
Yeah, every 5 years. There we go.
Okay. Shaking your hand.
Just make it a regular thing.
Okay, awesome. The biggest thing that everybody has been begging me for this interview when I announced it is the box. That is, everybody just wants to know anything about it because it's the biggest mystery out of the whole 10 years of FNAF, I would say. Maybe Midnight Motorist is number 2. But yeah, I'd say the box is the biggest mystery that everybody wants, like even a tiny snippet of something. Help.
Okay. Well, I can try to give somewhat of an answer to that, even though it might not be extremely satisfying for a lot of people. So I would encourage people to turn off the interview if they don't want an answer that they might not be happy with. But whenever I'm making these games, there are a lot of things that are in my head that are just flowing ideas. And when I have them and put them there, it's the first half of something. It's like a string or a rope, just like reaching out. And I know that what's there on the other end is there. I trust that it's there. I know that it's there. And then whenever I progress forward, the rest of that just reappears. The rest of it appears and just fits into place perfectly. That's how all my games have been made. I feel that there is something there, and I make the roads to get there for that to be revealed. But then sometimes when things do progress, the roads aren't always the same roads as the ones that had been planned before. And so what that means is, even though at the time something was definitely there, Something was definitely reaching out to be there, and I could feel that it was there. The progression of the story didn't go there, and so those strings never got pulled on, and those and the other half of that idea remained in the ether, remained in my subconscious. All of that to say, there is something in the box, but I never pursued it, and I don't know if I can find it again. And I think that that's the best answer that I can possibly give for that.
Scott, thank you so much for the interview. Myself and everybody really does
So,
appreciate.
yeah, what I kind of got from that was, if Scott felt the box was necessary still, or felt that the new story needed the box, he would have revealed it. But what the box is kind of now, after everything is said and done, is just setup that he didn't follow up on. Whatever vision he had or was setting up for himself no longer fit after FNAF 4's hype and kind of everything died off. Which is kind of what I got out of that. It is interesting because he kind of alluded to this in the retcon issue post years ago, that not everything he set up had the resolution that was kind of in mind or set up first for it, which is, I stand by, obviously, as someone who goes with the theory by victim receiver that he's the one receiving Happiest Day, that clearly when 3 came out, it was meant to be for Proto Cassidy / Golden Freddy. However, I just can't look at the events of FNAF 4 and FNAF World with dialogue like the whole dialogue of the pieces are in place for you, all you have to do is find them, rest, and it being a mirrored, like it being his death that's mirrored and all that, or where him standing where he was bit, and where Fredbear stood on his death day, or on the day he was injured. I guess he technically dies in the hospital later, but it's hard for me to look at those and not see the storytelling there, and instead see, oh, this is just for him to use memories to link to some other kid, because that's not... Whenever memories happened in other contexts, it was either you are the one freeing others with your memories, or we are restoring your memories so you can be freed, and sometimes a mixture of those two. In this case, the bite victim isn't seen on screen or given an updated inclusion in Happiest Day, so he's just kind of this amorphous magical being outside of the screen, and that's in a way kind of cool, but also isn't very satisfying to end his story. You know, when your character trait is crying all the time, you want to see the character stop crying. And instead, we don't see that. We kind of just assume it happens. And the character who stands where he was, where his story's climax is not him. And that's strange to me. And his whole thing is he's bullied by people, and you want people to stop being mean to him, and you want to see this character finally be happy. And I just don't feel that following FNAF 4, Cassidy Receiver really nails that story. It does it a little bit, but not really. Like, maybe I could see Scott really doubling down on that and all that, but like, I don't know, with 4, it's strange.
It. We're looking forward to the future. We're looking forward to this week. Future me is probably stressing out, playing all the demos and getting ready for Into the Pit in a few days. I'm so excited for Into the Pit. I really, really am. And all the fanverse stuff as well. My Pop Goes and The Joy of Creation, that demo. I'm looking forward to playing all of those as well and reading the new book. There's a lot in that week. I'm going to just be MIA that whole week. I've already told my friends and family, like, I'm not going to be here for the whole week. Don't call me. Don't text me. I'm going to be in this room just doing everything I can that week. And yeah, we really do appreciate it. So yeah, I think that's it. Which is really weird. That hour went so quick. Thank you guys for watching. Again, I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Without you guys,
I appreciate you, Dawko. Probably never going to see this, but here, I'll let it run out.
The channel. You know, I wouldn't be doing this in the first place. Interviewing Scott. So it really does mean a lot to me. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you all have a fantastic 10-year anniversary week, and you're all enjoying yourselves playing the demos and reading the books and stuff, and are excited for Into the Pit and Steel Wars announcement as well. That's so exciting. But yeah, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. So yeah, we'll
so it is interesting. So some of my takeaways from this, which are really interesting, is Burn Trap was always meant to be there, but he wasn't handled the way Scott intended, really. But also, it doesn't sound like he was handled. It sounds like something that I've always been hesitant on with the Burn Mimic stuff is if he's physically the same character as in Ruins DLC, and it's just a kind of design change that isn't physically demonstrated very well. I don't get why he, like, the Mimic entails, which is way before Security Breach, is this nigh physically unstoppable character who can do he's not as magical as like a character like Eleanor is, where she's capable of borderline witchcraft in some instances. Like, some of the stuff she pull, like the Agony characters pull off, is just straight up magic, I would argue. Even if it tries to give a magic system to that with like Agony and Remnant, it is just straight up supernatural processes. Whereas, well, the Mimic has like the lights flickering and stuff kind of like that. It's a very physical, intimidating villain with some psychological aspects to it. Whereas Burn Trap, I don't see why he doesn't just walk down the hall or the vent or something. Instead, he's trying to hack Glamrock Freddy and send the other characters after him. Which is weird. And I don't really get that. So I really want to... I'm actually kind of sad now that we didn't get Scott's Burn Trap. Because that sounds really cool. The idea of almost this decayed movie prop just being around that you never quite see, and with almost this Golden Freddy-like stillness to it. Sounds really interesting, and I would love to see a fan game based on that. I wonder if so there's a project I've been loosely working on. It's mostly writing based right now. It's not like there's no visuals attached to it, but I kind of want there to be. Its main purpose is to be in the FNAF TCG fandom booster. It's called Freddy's Bizarre Wonderland, which follows a modern day kind of copycat killer enthusiast of William Afton's history. But one of the names I wrote down for Freddy's Bizarre Wonderland, but I have no character for yet, is called Ouroboros Trap. Though I might change the name about this. I might just call them Ouroboros and give them the trap attribute. And they're like this sickening parody of what William is, almost. It's like the only idea I have from them. I just have the name and the idea that they're like a mockery of what William was unintentionally. Like, this is what... It's almost like Fanon William, if that makes sense. Like, the fandom's perception of what the character is, and the memes of it. But taken so seriously by Springy Lakerum, the villain. Like, just what an obsessed lunatic thinks William is what this character is. But the idea of Ouroboros sounds such like an intimidating, all-encompassing concept to me. The idea of the snake eating its own tail for eternity. And the idea that still suit, just barely out of the corner that you don't understand. That's not even like Golden Freddy, it's just there. Kind of like one-upping what Shadow Freddy was. That's really interesting. I kind of want to work that into Ouroboros' vibe and deal. I don't really have any other thoughts for this, because I've said most of what I think of most things. This is good Stitchline Tales fuel in some spots that Scott did right more than we thought he did. Because I don't even think Stitchline people said he wrote as much as he's saying he did. But at the same time, it does confirm... This confirms something I always wondered, which was... Did Scott give writers the premise? Like, what... This, like I said, something I was wondering with VIP is how many things are mistakes and how many things are intentional. And I still don't know with this. I wonder, like, let's take Frailty. Frailty is going to be the most divisive one where people are going to interpret it the most different ways after this. Because I could see either, oh, Scott wrote in a story with the intent of there being a pendant in it that brings it back to people, and that we might link that back to Eleanor. But I could also see Scott wrote a story where a girl was able to use magic, and that magic ultimately kills her. Or use magic to help people, but that magic ultimately has the cost of killing her. And then the writer was like, oh yeah, like the pendant from the Stingers. We can link it to that, because I worked on that, or something like that. Or Eleanor's plotline, for example. It's hard for me to say what without knowing what Scott wrote for that. And then he specifically said that for Fright, so how much did he do for Tales is the other question. Is like, how, once again, how much further do we go for this? Did he even write an outline for Tales, or did he just create the premise of the story? I'm assuming he wrote the 10 to 15 pages like he said he did for Frights, but he technically didn't say that. I'm curious what the fandom will walk away with this information. I do think more and more now that the answers to the series are more and more of a mixed, complicated of yeses and nos than we've thought before. I think the community has been very like binary in its timeline perception on a greater scale, where you have the Stitchline crowd versus the non-Stitchline crowd, let's say. And the Stitchline crowd has a very specific view on what the timeline is. That's a very blanket sweeping statement. And likewise, on the flip side, you have the, let's say, anti-books crowd, which also have a very binary view on what the timeline is. And I think there's more true in both than anyone has been looking for thus far. And that's something I was thinking of with Fall of Victim Shatter Mode, is like, I was wondering, is there something to Shatter Mode? Is there, or to Shatter Victim? Is there something to every Bayou Victim theory? Is what that video started as. And I'm thinking maybe it is a bit of everything. I've thought of something I've nicknamed Cassidy arc for a timeline, where Cassidy where the point of Andrew is to show what Cassidy could have been if left unchecked, basically. The idea of, like, if Cassidy is the one sentient spirit of the original 5, other than, like, I mean Charlie's sentient, but I mean of the MCI kids, and they have that entire series, then there's a lot of time for Cassidy to change as a character and become interesting. You could have the Cassidy in 1 and 2 and 3 be this vengeful character who wanted what basically UCN was for William. However, I think in 3 they can see the flaws of this. With Springtrap surviving, they can kind of go through what I was talking about earlier, the Blackjack kind of realization that, like, as much as you hate this person and you want to see them suffer, it's not working. The suffering for someone who thrives on suffering isn't what it was to you. And that is like this pivotal change for Cassidy moving forward. And that could be why Happiest Day wasn't possible prior to 3. Is they were still determined to kill William before they grew as a character, if that makes sense. They were able to look beyond themselves and beyond hunting William down. And the logbook marks the beginning of that change with the 30 years of reflection to think about this. And in a way, seeing the Springtrap is the monster that they have brought upon the world. Cassidy is the one leading the charge and pressuring William to becoming Springtrap. And now he's just out there hunting more people and hurting more people. So it would be interesting to see a Cassidy who was basically Andrew for most of the series and finally learns to not be. And you can have that with the Cassidy being the vengeful spirit or without, in my opinion. You can have it being their last straw, their last efforts to torment William, and then doing it for a while, but then immediately kind of realizing this all this is. Like the idea of tormenting him has lost its luster almost. And that can be your void cutscene and your old man consequences cutscene, like leave the demon to his demons moment. You could even have a UCN Descent version of that where they might help and they would think about helping Andrew, or they would be around Andrew and then watch him torment William and be like, oh, is that what I was like? Is that what I would have been if I didn't think about what I've done? And you can have them move on their own there. And you can work that a variety of ways. The way I would personally theorize it is you have Bite Victim Receiver and you have all the spirits move on, but then you have Cassidy just watching UCN happen from a distance. Not moving on themselves yet, because like I said, that character arc, that retrospective development on it all. And not being certain about it anymore. And UCN Descent less being, oh, I'm helping or I'm hurting the scenario, but instead just being watching. And just being like, I don't know anymore. And realizing this isn't the way. It's a fucking... This is the one thing I don't like about any... This is one thing I've never liked about Andrew being the vengeful spirit is, if any other spirits are aware of this is an ass move to leave him there. Like, that's such a jerk move for any character. Like, Charlie... If Charlie's actually in UCN, Charlie not stopping Andrew is... He's so weird, that character. Same thing with Cassidy, if they're not an angry spirit. But, I mean, if Andrew's the vengeful spirit, that has to... Something kind of like that has to be the case no matter what, where someone... Either they... The best timeline, I think, for Andrew being the vengeful spirit is that no one actually knows. No one is actually there in Ultimate Custom Night. They're just... But then again, yeah, the Ultimate Custom Night has Charlie speak, whether that's actually Charlie or just a replica of what she was like. That implies the vengeful spirit knows her. And that means Charlie should likewise know the vengeful spirit and do nothing about what's stupid. That doesn't make any fucking sense for Charlie's character, in my opinion. I don't even see why Charlie would let UCN happen. Personally, like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. Unless the idea was Charlie can't stop it, but then she's like, but I am very aware in Ultimate Custom Night, so what the hell was the point there? It's... I don't know. I I guess we'll just have to wait and see on it, to be honest. We'll just have to wait and see on it. If such time happens, it happens. And we'll interpret it as we get more information on it. Because I feel like if we are getting frights as games, then we are going to get more on it, obviously. We're going to get more development on it. We're going to learn more about it. Let's see if there's anything I missed in the last 20 seconds.
Both leave now.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Dawko. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank
Bye, guys.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.